Hello everyone and welcome to video 3 of 3 featuring the Loch Fyne Whiskey series. This is a 7-year-old 53% Williamson. Now for all of you who know, that is essentially code for Laphroaig, after the name Betty Williamson, who was the lady who ran the distillery for quite a long time. Before we jump into this, I'm just going to show you the colour difference on the 3 whiskies we've done so far. So the Williamson's just in the glass there. Make sure I get these labels right. So here is the colour profile of these whiskies. Now I'm trying to make sure I can get them and see. This is the Islay, which is a Caol Ila. This is the Ledaig in the middle, so 12-year-old, 11-year-old, and this is the one we're trying right now. This is the Williamson at 7 years old. And it just goes to show how important cask influence is in this, because between 12, 11 and 7, the 7-year-old and the 12-year-old are almost the same colour. So just because of the youthfulness on that 7-year-old, I would assume that it's either first fill bourbon or it's like the first refill of the cask, really. But yes, it's a Laphroaig. What do we know about Laphroaig? 7 years old at 53%. On paper, this thing should be very rocket fuel-like. I'm expecting quite a lot of spirit-driven influence despite the nice colour at 7 years old. And something I've always enjoyed about Laphroaig, because given my buying history, I would probably say that Laphroaig is my favourite Islay distillery. 10 sherry, great. Quarter cask was good. Used to love the 18-year-old. Had the privilege to try on the 25-year-old a few times. Always good. Tried a lot of single casks. Always good. So specifically Laphroaig. But outside of the very dry, bleachy, TCP, iodine-esque nature of their 10-year-old, I've always found some really nice sweetness in Laphroaig. It's always been like white chocolate, hazelnut. It's always been just rather outstanding and quite delicious. I think that's one of the reasons I love it so much, because most people think it's a very 2D whiskey. And I'm quoting someone who is very famous for advertising Islay whiskey there, who we had a chat with in the shop a couple of years ago. He thought Laphroaig was very two-dimensional. I think the opposite of that. I think there's quite a lot going on with it, and it can be a very, very interesting spirit. But here we are, Williamson 7-year-old at 53%. Let's smell, let's taste. Okay, that doesn't smell like Laphroaig. That doesn't smell like Laphroaig at all. Ooh. There's a very naturally sweet quality to this, but there's almost no peat. I mean, don't get me wrong, when you smell this, if you ever get to try this, you will smell peat. But all of those predispositions that are in your mind of a 7-year-old Laphroaig at 53%, it does not smell like that. So the two things I'm getting straight away, one is like spun sugar, which can lead to many different things. So kind of caramelized, toffee, taffy-like sugar. The other thing is peppercorns, very specifically like pink peppercorns. They just have that kind of like fizzy spice to them. And then being a bourbon cask, obviously we're getting some vanilla. There's almost like a coconut thing to it as well. It's like overall, generally quite sweet, just to smell it. Really getting none of that iodine-y TCP. It's coming across more as very fragrant, very light peat. There's also a really interesting spice note in the back of there, and I can't figure out if it's like garam masala or something like that. But something kind of powdered and savoury and a bit spicy. Let's taste it. Whoa. Okay, so this does some pretty interesting stuff. So, as this is video 3 of 3, the Caol Ila, let's imagine there's a scale here. I would put the Caol Ila over here in terms of sharpness, brightness. It's got some nice kind of savoury notes to it. The Ledaig, I would put on the opposite side of the scale because it's dirtier, it's heavier, it's spicier. Even though it's got this very bright, tangy cheddar note in it, it is very different to the Caol Ila. This I would put there. The arrival on this is as soft and sweet as the smell is. But the interesting thing is that it's the driest of the three by quite a long way. And that's where you start to get the indication that this is a Laphroaig. It pulls moisture from your mouth. Like my tongue feels like it's got a film over it. I'm just going to move these slightly forward so that I don't knock them over. We'll try it for a second time. There's also a very comforting nature to this Williamson. The finish of it, the finish of it purely reminds me of tea, like black tea. And I've said that on I said that at a tasting. We tried Gold Spot at a tasting, and the smell of it just reminds me of black tea. The finish on this has that beautiful, comforting warmth that first sip of tea can give you, or coffee. It doesn't have the flavour profile of coffee, but just that kind of warmth and that comfort. It really is there. The dryness is present throughout all of it, and if you gave that to me blind, that's the only thing that would make me think this is a Laphroaig. That chalky, ashy dryness that I would say Laphroaig is pretty famous for. To smell it on the second time, it still smelled beautifully sweet, very sugary. And then just one more sip because I quite enjoy that. So for like the first 3 seconds as you kind of chew on it, it's still this really nice, sweet, what seems like not lightly, but lesser peated whiskey. Play with semantics there a bit. And then as you chew on it, the dryness pulls through. Thankfully I've now tried Lapsang Souchong, so I know what that tastes like, and that's where the tea element comes into it. But the savouriness, the soft woodiness, the herbaceousness of it, there's like a bay leaf, thymy, cardamom, olive oil thing. Like the finish now, what I'm tasting as I'm speaking to you is nutty, olive oil. There are traces of sweetness, but instead of being the focal point, they've kind of moved out to the sides. And what's in the middle now are these nuttier, oilier, more savoury notes. I have to say it's hard to pick the Ledaig and this. Of the three, those two are my favourite by far. What to score it? Because it doesn't smell like a Laphroaig, which I think in itself is quite interesting, because when you think about Laphroaig, we all instantly get certain things in our head and we can already taste and smell stuff. And it does the opposite of that, so it's already a little bit more interesting, especially at a younger age. Taste-wise, it's pretty classic Laphroaig. Finish-wise, it's pretty classic Laphroaig. Nothing wrong with that. But that's a very interesting barrel, and I can see why they would pick that, because obviously they can't legally call it Laphroaig because of naming rights. So if no one knew what that was, it would be really interesting to tell them that it is Laphroaig. I'll stick with my guns. I'm going to give that an 8.5 as well. Only because it doesn't get a 9, because it would be nice if the nose, as beautiful and sweet as it was, had just a bit more of a Laphroaig thing to it. But I think that's quite a personal thing. I'm being very subjective there. But I'd give that an 8.5 as well. So that's the Williamson Loch Fyne Whiskies 7-year-old at 53%. That's going to come in at 92 a bottle. And of all of these whiskies, I don't know cask numbers. I think I mentioned it in the Loch Fyne Whiskey Islay / Caol Ila video, that as they're all refill bourbons at 12, 11 and 7 years old, you're probably looking at anywhere between sort of 300 to maybe about 450 bottles. But yes, all very unique, all quite different, all very interesting cask types. So there should be a link below at this point in the info. Click see more thing to take you straight to Loch Fyne's websites to check out. But yes, thank you all for watching this trio of videos. I'll see you all next week with some rather interesting bottles which are just to my right. But yes, I'll see you all soon. Have a good day.